Hi. So, you gotta stop aiming for happiness. It's not the goal in life. Or call it whatever, meaning, goal, purpose, whatever. Happiness comes and it goes. And you can certainly do activities that make you happy. But that's exactly what you should stop doing. So, if happiness is not the goal, what is? It's meaning or meaningfulness. So here's the thing. I was really depressed a few years ago, and antidepressants fixed that. Well, fixed. So the thing is, I was no longer sad or down all the time. I mean, I think calling depression just being sad is not exactly a very good description of it. But yeah. So the issue was I wasn't sad anymore, but I felt really intense self-hatred towards myself, and I wasn't happy with myself. I found that my life was not meaningful, and through conscious effort I learned to take action that actually made my life more meaningful. Simply erasing the sadness. Meaning, I was pretty much happy or neutral all the time. But since I was spending like most of my days playing video games, I was mostly happy. And that sounds like such a good thing, you know? That I was happy for a lot of time. I mean, yeah, but guess what it was followed by? By the time I'd closed the video game, maybe sometimes even during the playing of it, I just sit there and I think how many better things I could be doing with my time. Back to this like self-hatred idea that I hated that I wasn't getting things done. I wasn't down. I wasn't sad. I was happy. But it didn't matter. So there's a pretty good analogy here. So if you give a child some candy, you make that child happy. But that most certainly doesn't mean that you should give a child candy all the time. Maybe not at all, even. But like, the point being that you can't just be happy all the time. Sometimes the child has to have healthy food. Whether he's happy or she, whether the child is happy about it or not. And as somewhat of a counterpoint, exercising, working out, I'd say that probably doesn't make most people happy, at least like during it, especially like maybe if you've been doing it for a long time, maybe it might. I've certainly heard people enjoy exercise, but I'm not so sure if it's during it or it's just that they're talking about the feeling afterwards. But the point is, I certainly don't exactly love exercise during it. I mean, it's like very demanding, both focus and like physically. And it's certainly not enjoyable. Once again, like on during the actual exercise. Afterwards, you feel fine. Yeah, like even like great, because obviously it does improve your physical health, and I'd argue mental health maybe even more. But yeah, so so exactly this idea. Exercise may feel really like unfun in the moment, or like you really don't want to do it because it's difficult. But in the long run, it improves your physical and mental health enormously. So it's like the exact opposite of this give a child a candy example. You know, one makes the child immediately happy, while the other one makes you kind of, what would be the right word to describe the feeling that you get while you're exercising? Like, you get it. You feel immediate strain, you know? You, as soon as an exercise starts to like near difficulty, you know? So if you do something, maybe like the first few reps aren't difficult, but you keep doing it, and once you get closer to failure, I mean, with each rep you probably like you wanna quit because it's not fun. You know, it's very straining, but you keep going and you feel much better afterwards. So yeah, you don't need to be happy all the time. Happiness comes and goes whether you seek it or not. So kind of like what I mentioned with video games. I was able to be happy all the time, but I felt like, I'm not gonna say miserable, but I would simply, well, self-hatred. I felt self-hatred towards myself after playing them. So I couldn't maintain the happiness like 24/7, even then. And now that I have cut back on that and focus more on self-improvement, sure, I don't feel happiness, let's say, as much as I used to, but rather I don't experience that self-hatred, and I do still experience happiness. So, and what I mean by experiencing happiness is, you know, there are different forms of happiness. There's the good kind and the bad kind. So let's give some examples of both. Let's say you go out on a date. Everything is going great, or everything goes great. At the end of it, you decide, yeah, both of you really like each other, and you decide to go on another date. Would this make you feel happy? Probably. Most likely, actually. You'd probably feel pretty happy afterwards. So, that's certainly not a bad kind of happiness. But it is sort of a momentary happiness, though. Unlike something like video games, which just last for a really long time, and then you come crashing down with like the self-hatred and the feeling of being useless because you didn't accomplish anything. So, as an example of a bad form of happiness, let's take something that almost every young man struggles with, especially nowadays: pornography. So that's a pretty you have this very intense amount of happiness that you just keep building up until you ejaculate, and assuming you're at all on any sort of no-fap or semen retention, or just generally trying to cut back on masturbation or pornography, you probably feel pretty bad afterwards. And even if you aren't on any of those, like, afterwards, you don't feel good. Like, everybody knows this. You may have like brain fog afterwards. You may just simply feel ashamed, and something that happens to a lot of people who have especially been taking part of this, or taking part in pornography for a long time, may very well feel a certain amount of like shame towards whatever they just fapped to. So yeah, that's a pretty good example of a bad form of happiness. Because sure, you do feel happy while you're doing it and at that peak, but then immediately after, you're like, you plummet down to below your baseline of happiness. Like, so you feel miserable afterwards. So yeah, that's not a good way to live. So this is all really pretty much exactly what, I have the Jordan Peterson's 12 rules for life there, and this is basically exactly rule 7. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. So basically just Pursue what makes your life more meaningful, not what makes you happy. But obviously, you can't cut away everything that makes you happy. And I'm not saying you should, because once again, good and bad forms of happiness. But even like bad forms of happiness, you probably shouldn't cut out all of it at once, unless you have a very good way of replacing it immediately with something that you can keep up, which you probably don't. Cut back in proportions. See how much you can cut back. Let's say you're playing like 10 hours of video games a day. Even getting to like 9 is a big improvement. It doesn't sound like a big improvement, saying like, oh yeah, I mean, I used to play 10 hours, now I play 9 hours. But that's an hour. That's 1 extra hour a day to spend on anything else. That's a lot. So cut back as much as you can, but like always cut it into proportions that are small enough to handle. So if you are playing 10 hours of video games a day, I'm gonna say right now out of the blue, like, you won't be able to go to 1 hour or less. You won't be able to keep that up. It's because what are you even gonna do with that all that time that you now have at the ready? See, here's the thing. I mean, you have all these things that you probably gotta get done, but you'll notice very soon, once you start cutting back on these instant gratification, pleasurable experiences, that you want to constantly keep coming back. And that's why you should, at least I believe, cut back in small proportions. Yeah. So let's take one more example with that 10 hours. You could try to go from 10 hours to 9. Sure. But maybe you can't do that. Try 9.5. 9 and 45 minutes. And just keep cutting that into smaller pieces until you can actually do it. But you gotta be serious about it. Yeah. Stop pursuing happiness and pursue meaning instead. Bye.